Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Joe Miller. Joe Miller represents the 102nd Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes parts of Dutchess County. We thank you folks throughout the Mid-Hudson region for joining us today. Dr. Miller, always a pleasure to have you here.
Terrific. It's nice to start the year, and we're starting it on a very good note.
Yeah, our first show of the 2012 legislative session. We've already got a lot to talk about. Things are happening pretty quick here in Albany.
I will tell you, the governor has set the stage. He gave an excellent state of the state, and he gave an even better budget presentation. Yes, and the result of that were the hearings we had yesterday on education. This was K through 12, and different than any other year. This is my 18th year. Typically, people come in and the commissioner would be sitting there going, oh, just give us the money, give us the money. Not a little bit of money. I mean, they used to talk, we need $4 billion more for this. Not this year. The new commissioner, Dr. King, gave a very good presentation. Didn't ask for another dime. Basically, talked about the difficulties that education might have. Didn't explain in my way how education could survive, but he just said that some districts could either run out of money and not be able to afford their budget, or run out of academic qualification, and that is due to cuts, not have the diversity of academics, different language, different science, different math, that would allow the students who graduate from that school system to compete with other students for entrance to college. And it was left there. Now, some of the panel people, took different views of what he said, but the philosophy that I have works very well with the reality. There was on one of the pages, page 18, by the way, if anyone wanted to look, there was a chart showing two lines. The lower line was the line that showed the available monies for education. Basically, that line was telling us this is what the people in New York State can afford. This is this takes into account their increases in earnings, if any. This is the rate of inflation, and this is what we're going to be doing in education based on the governor's budget. Very good governor, very good governor's budget. The other line diverged from that, separating by, in just a short time, 3 or 4 years, by billions of dollars. I think at one point it was, in the short range, it was over $9 billion. And that was the line projecting the amount of money that would have been spent on education had the current absolutely ridiculous rate of inflation in education continued, where we see either flat inflation, education was 7.5% to 8%. And so now you're seeing fantasy world versus reality. In the past, people demanded, and the state tried to, and school districts tried to, raise the money to pay for Fantasyland. This year, there was no talk about trying to do that, and that means that taxpayers may be able to live in New York for another few years. What we had up until now is exactly what the governor described, an education industry. He referred to them as professionals, an education industry made up of different unions that demanded more with no regard to what the children got out of the system. They told us, they told us it was for the children. It's not for the children. When you increase the salary of a school teacher, when you increase the salary of a principal, when you increase the salary of any of the administrators, that doesn't go to help the children. And with 85 to 90% of a school budget being based on salaries, that's what we're talking about. We're not buying more education. You can't buy a pound of education. You can't buy a cubic yard of education. All we've been doing is giving the same people who have been educating our children more and more money. We have enhanced their lifestyle.
He described it as a jobs program for adults.
There you go.
Rather than...
That's exactly right.
An educational system
That's
for the children.
And the public, especially people with kids in the school system, have been duped. Once again, the emperor's new clothes. Give us the money, your kids will be educated. Well, how successful was the program? In this presentation, there was also information about success. More and more kids are graduating from high school. Does that mean something? Nothing at all. What it proved in the total presentation is we have dumbed down the requirements to graduate, because there was another page that showed the difference between the percentage of kids that graduate and the percentage of kids that graduate college ready. College ready, where 34% of our graduates are college ready. 34%. And that's because in some areas like mine, kids do well, but in other areas, especially our inner cities, where the money goes, they don't do well. As low as 12% college ready for some groups. And so we not only are spending a huge amount of money to pretend we're teaching these kids, we're spending additional money to remediate them when they get into college, and then they fail out anyway. So we have gotten very little for the money we have spent. And there were still people on the panel who wanted to go up to the fantasy world. But when you get nothing for the money you spend, you stop spending it.
I want to ask you about something that the governor suggested, and I get the sense that you were heading there anyway, in which and I think this grabbed the fancy of an awful lot of New Yorkers, that besides reining into the reality world education spending, he says, and even if you want the reality spending, you school districts out there, if you want another nickel or another dime, it's going to be tied to teacher evaluations, trying to improve.
Right. But I take exception to, it's not the reality spending. That was the fantasy spending. If you want money for fantasy spending, you better allow us to evaluate teachers. Any system in which seniority is the only basis for job stability and for pay raises and everything else, better students, easier classes, has to fail. You have to have some type of system where you rate the quality of the person. Now, that's not easy, because
some will say it's not fair. It's not fair.
Some things, let's just say it's fair, but it's not easy. To actually be able to evaluate a teacher's performance when some teachers have kids who are easily taught and some teachers have kids who are very difficult to teach is not easy. How you evaluate a music teacher, an art teacher, and a math teacher are completely different. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it's impossible, and it doesn't mean we should try. But who is leading the charge against it? The teachers union. They have filed suit, and there is a suit currently going on against the state education department trying to prevent this type of evaluation. Yet we took $700 million from the federal government based on the fact that we passed a law which required teacher evaluation. And now the teachers union will be solely responsible for the loss of $700 million plus an additional in excess of $300 billion for a second program, which the federal government has already told us. If you don't get these teacher evaluations things working, even though it's the law, everyone ignored it, but if you don't get it working, you will lose over $1 billion, and we're going to take it back out of other programs we would have funded you for. So now the great teachers union, which talks about only caring about the kids, There could be the cause of over $1 billion in lost revenue to New York State out of trying to protect the unprotectable, and that is failed teaching, failed teachers. Now, keep in mind that the teachers union is different than the teachers. Most of our teachers, the overwhelming number of our teachers, work really hard. They care about the kids. They are dedicated. But when you have a union that will come into a school district and say to a teacher, you have decided to tutor a kid during your lunch and not get paid for it, that is unacceptable, and we are filing a grievance against you for caring, for doing your job.
And it happens.
It did happen.
It happens all the time.
It happened in my own district.
It happened to my own kids in public school.
So you have to separate the teachers from the teachers union. Now, in reality, one could say you can't fault the teachers union. That's their job. Their job is to get as much as they can for their members. People who you really have to fault are the school boards, who, without regard to the community and pretending previous contracts held them hostage, that what other school districts have done, have put a gun to their head, and so they gave away everything, that was no excuse. And that's what happens when you have a system where you elect total amateurs to run a $150 million business. They are clueless. And we have paid the price for clueless school boards that have fallen to the power of the teachers' union. Now, I don't see the teachers' union revolting against the union. That's a kind of difficult thing to do. But my anger is directed specifically at the teachers' union for having taken advantage of a situation. After all, someone drops the wallet out of their pocket, you can simply pick it up and walk away, or you could give it back. That's the difference between caring, being honest, and ethical. But when you say, our members pay taxes also, and my answer to that is, let me get this straight. Your members are willing to pay $500 more in school tax so they can get a $4,000 pay raise, and you think I'm supposed to buy that as if that's a problem, as if they're giving up something? Their neighbor has to pay the same $500 more, but the neighbor has either lost their job, is only part-time employed, or working at a job that pays far less than it used to. They don't care about the neighbors. They only care about the power of their own union. But the governor has set the tone. It followed through on the budget hearings. The governor has made it clear that now is the time for us to get serious about how we spend the money and to advocate for the kids, not for the adults whose lives have been enhanced by education spending.
We are out of time here today. It is always an interesting program, Dr. Miller. We look forward to meeting with you in coming weeks to find out how this is all going to play out. We've got other issues that are on the table that are going to be big pension reform. You mentioned briefly there
Going to win that one also.
The public employees unions and how big and powerful they are here in Albany. I hope you folks will join us. It's going to be some interesting programs coming up this session with Joel Miller. We want to thank you for joining us today. We'll hope to see you for those next programs of Assembly Calendar.